There's very few things in this world that actually piss me off and make me angry. And one of them is Harvard's affirmative action restricting access to Asian Americans simply based on the color of their skin. And yes, the same thing can apply for white people. It is absurd that they will tell people you can't go to school, you can't have a job simply because there are too many people who look like you. That's literal racism. It is some of the most insane bullshit I've ever heard. So I tweeted in response to the ACLU. I said, restricting an individual's access to higher education based on race is wrong. You can't restrict a person because someone else who looks like them already goes to Harvard. That is insanely racist. You see, the ACLU tweeted this: make no mistake, a lawsuit against Harvard that's purported to represent the interests of Asian Americans would, if successful, primarily benefit white students. Primarily benefit white students. Right, okay. So what they're saying is they're trying to own, like the joke is they're going to own the white people by sacrificing Asians. And this is why this argument doesn't work. And the arguments in defense of the ACLU and Harvard are batshit. And they piss me off to an extreme degree. People, my God, like this, I can't tell you how much this really makes me angry because this is literal systemic racism. This is the definition of systemic racism. So let's take a look at this, right? I'm not going to go through what these charts actually mean. I got a story from the Wall Street Journal because the first day of trials, there's a lawsuit against Harvard for being racist. And we can see here that we've got a list of applicants. Hispanic and African American are on the same number of applications. Asians are here and whites are here. The point is, there is a person in this country whose grandparents are from America and whose great-grandparents may have emigrated here from some faraway land in East Asia. And they have been American for over 100 years. And they've probably faced racism in the early 1900s, as well as internment, which happened to mostly Japanese, but other Asian people who people were scared of. Yes, there's tons of racism against Asians. And now there's going to be a kid who is born in a mixed-race neighborhood, who knows nothing but English, whose parents know nothing but English, who might even be mixed-race Asian. And he's going to say, if I work hard enough, I can get into Harvard. Except Harvard says, well, you look a certain way, so we think there are too many people who look like you and you can't come into this school. You cannot talk about how we want to end discrimination and that all people are equal if you're going to separate people based on race. What Harvard is doing is segregation and racism. They're literally complaining that there are too many Asians at Harvard, so they're going to make it harder for Asians to get in. This is psychotic behavior. I know some Asian people who are pot-smoking dumbasses who skateboard all day. They're not smart enough to get into Harvard. Not only that, but even if they were of average intelligence, Harvard's going to keep them out simply because of where their grandparents may have come from. That's insane. This is when people are constantly complaining about Trump and his Trump supporters being racist and they want to restrict, immigrants and all that stuff. It's like, dude, you've literally got people who are Americans who look a certain way being restricted access to higher education simply for looking a certain way. That is fucking bullshit. And you know what? Harvard's defending the practice. And there are people on the left. And this is why I call them crypto racists, okay? I call them crypto racists because they claim to be fighting racism, but they are extremely racist. People are arguing with me. They're going, but Tim, if Harvard already has 20% Asian people, that's a disproportionate representation of Asians in the actual country. And I said, Harvard has the perfect proportion of Americans at what, like 90 or 80% or something? The overwhelming majority of Harvard is American, right? I'm pretty sure that's true. I could be wrong. The point is, why are we claiming that it's more important that people look different than we just support everyone? It's ridiculous segregationism that Harvard is going to say, we can't have more people who look a certain way than this group of people. Why? Why can't people just look however they are? Why can't people be human beings? Why can't we say, you know what, if you're smart enough to get into Harvard, you come to Harvard. Let's read what they had to say. Harvard University's longtime admission dean defended the school's recruitment of prospective students in the first day of a landmark trial accusing Harvard of discriminating against Asian American applicants. And I want to point this out too. Same thing can go for white people. I know slack-jawed moron white people who want to rise up out of the gutter and they want to bust their ass to go to Harvard. Why should we tell them you can't go to Harvard because too many people look like you? It's the same thing, period. I'd be just as mad if we did the same thing to any race. individuals strive to do their best. There are people in this country who were born, let's say a Latino, right? We're going to argue that Latinos need an easier time of getting into Harvard. Does Carlos Slim's children need a leg up? Does Serena Williams' child need a leg up going to Harvard? No, they fucking don't. Okay? Why are we going to say that based on how you look is how we're going to determine whether or not you can go to this school? There are people who are poor of all races. There are people who are rich of all races. And we shouldn't be giving advantages to people just based on what they look like. That is psychotic racist behavior. And the crypto racists claim to be fighting racism when in reality, they're some of the most racist motherfuckers I have ever met in my life. You had Antifa in Portland screaming racial slurs. They were screaming the N-word. I kid you not. Oregon Live has a story. I didn't pull it up. I don't want to talk about it, but you can Google it. Literally screaming racial slurs. And does anybody call them out? No. You know what they say on Facebook to me? They say, well, at least that group's fighting fascism and fascists are racist, so I'm okay with it. Absolutely unacceptable. And that means if you are fighting fascism and you go out and you start screaming racial slurs and Antifa supports you in jail, they give you resources, they welcome you to their meetings, they are supporting racist, they are supporting crypto racism. On Monday, lawyers for the plaintiffs focused on internal documents showing Harvard sends targeted letters to high school students who score well on PSATs, encouraging them to consider applying to the prestigious school. The score thresholds vary by race. They actually point out that white students received a recruitment letter, saying that if they scored 1310 or higher, they had a chance to enter Harvard. Asian women get 1350, and Asian men get 1380. Native American, Black, and Hispanic, it says 1100. They're literally telling Asians, you have to be better than everyone else if you want to go to our school. Why? It's not even so much as they're saying Asians, they're going to restrict you. It's that they're literally saying, we're going to make it harder for you. For no reason, we're going to put obstacles in your way simply because we don't like where your grandparents, your great-grandparents came from. That is un-American. That is absolutely racist. I was shocked to learn the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of this. It is, in my opinion, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I can't imagine that our country, which says all men are created equal, all people are created equal, in my opinion, is then going to allow a university like Harvard to say, we can control for what people look like when they come here. I would understand if affirmative action had to do with foreigners, immigrants. I would understand if affirmative action had more to do with class, because there are poor white people. Why don't we focus on class and say, hey, if you're poor, we'll give you an advantage. If you're rich, we won't. Because rich people don't need the same advantage. And I'll admit, it would still suck to be discriminated against simply because your parents were well off. However, the amount of advantages the average wealthy person has compared to the poor person is observable. Literally is observable. But you can't look at a person's skin and determine whether or not they are poor or wealthy. That literally makes no sense. You can't look at a person's skin and determine whether or not they had the ability to go to a good school or not. Quite literally, if you have money, you are more likely to be able to have certain accolades and things of that nature. And I'll admit, I'm not even entirely in support of discriminating against people, period. However, I do believe that as a social liberal, we have to alleviate some problems with some kind of regulation, with some kind of system. And that means the best thing we can do for people who are minorities, the best thing we can do for poor white people, is simply say, if you're poor, we will do our best to help you succeed. If you are wealthy, you're already doing fine. You've probably got healthcare. You've probably got all the things you need. You're wealthy. You don't need help. I don't like the idea of forcing people to help others. But I do think that as a society, there is a moral obligation that if you want to participate in our system that allows you to enjoy certain wealth, you should give back, and there should be proportionality to it. According to the story, after they show all these wonderful charts, students who qualify for these letters are twice as likely to be admitted as students who qualify for these letters are twice as likely to be admitted as students who don't qualify, according to a handbook provided to Harvard's alumni interviewers. William Fitzsimmons, Harvard's admissions dean since 1986, defended the policy by saying the letters to white students in more rural states help the school recruit from areas where students may be less aware of Harvard. We do everything we can to reach out to a much broader range of people. Fitzsimmons said, the lower thresholds for underrepresented minorities take into consideration how the rather stark economic difference and opportunity How the rather stark economic difference in opportunities those students face may affect their ability to score higher on standardized tests. Later in the trial, Fitzsimmons will be asked to explain why Asian American applicants receive the highest academic and extracurricular scores among any racial group, but the lowest personal scores, a factor in Harvard's admissions that assesses personality traits such as likability, courage, and kindness. I'll tell you why. Because of racists, because of racism, because of cultural bias, because the people at Harvard look at Asians and say, I don't like the way you act. You're not courageous, you're not likable, and you're not kind. And that's why they're not letting them in, because of cultural bias and because of racism. I don't understand how you can have an institution that's been historically and overwhelmingly white straight up say they're going to sacrifice one race in exchange for another, and that isn't racist, that people would actually support this system. The left likes to say, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Some people shorten it to injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. This is literal injustice. I want you to look into the eyes of that poor, impoverished Asian child and tell them you will not ever go to Harvard because the system is going to be stacked against you. That is fucked up. That is fucking racism. And it pisses me off more than anything else. There's very few things that I get genuinely angry about. But one thing that really bothers me is overt and literal racism. Systemic racism exists. Blockbusting and redlining held back black families from owning property for a really long time, and it put them in very difficult positions. And that was fucked up. And we did a lot to end that. And I'm glad that we did as a country. Right now, we are taking great strides to end racism. Yet for some reason, the left-wing crypto-racists are supporting this systemic racism. Why? Because they're hypocrites. Because they don't actually care about protecting people. They're more worried about making sure that they have a rainbow of skin color than protecting the content of people's characters. And you know what? I'm going to call it out. And I'm going to be angry about it. You'll notice there's very few things I get overtly political about on Twitter, but I have no problem calling the ACLU a racist organization that supports systemic racism. They are more concerned with the percentage of people with a certain skin type than the individuals who strive to better themselves and to go to these schools. If you want to alleviate racial injustice, the strategy isn't to blanket say all people of this race are wealthy and all people of this race are poor. It's to deal with class issues. If the idea is that certain races are over or underrepresented in different classes, then we don't need to say we're going to give a race an advantage, because we can help everyone, including Latinos, blacks, Asians, and white people, no matter what your race is, by simply dealing with class issues. But these people are racist. They can't see past the color of someone's skin. They don't seem to understand that Asian people have varying personalities. And now I'm going to go talk to my skateboarder, punk rock stoner Asian friend and tell him, you know what? We're going to make life harder for you simply because too many people at these academic institutions look the same as you. Yeah. Anyway, I'm done. I got more videos coming up in just a few minutes, so stick around.